Hey, Stet here, and welcome to Zooanalysis, the series where I look at different animals and break them down to what they look like, where they live, what they eat, etc. What do you think of when you hear the words starfish or sea star? 5 arms, looks practically harmless, sits pretty much still on rocks in the ocean, has a little face with a mouth like in Finding Nemo? Most of those could be true in most cases. One of the exceptions, however, is this guy, Acanthaster planci, more commonly known as the Crown-of-Thorns Starfish. The Crown-of-Thorns Starfish is an invertebrate, meaning it has no backbone or any bones for that matter. It belongs to the phylum Acanthaster, a group that typically has pentaradial symmetry and a mouth on the underside of their bodies. This includes things like sea stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. Sea stars themselves belong to the class Asteroidea, a group that abundantly demonstrates the echinoderm's characteristic pentaradial symmetry. They're pretty recognizable with their 5 arms and a central disc that contains their mouth on the underside and the gonads, digestive tract, and fluid-filled locomotory canals in each of the 5 arms. Basically, how sea stars get around is they take in water through an opening on the top called the matchporoid and distribute it to the canals in their arms, which in turn inflate the 2 feet under the arms, allowing the sea stars to move very slowly. The Crown-of-Thorns scientific name, Acanthaster planci, is mostly derived from Greek, with acanth meaning thorn or thorny, and aster meaning star. The planci part is a root for plankton, an indication of its slow movement. Now, as for its common name, anyone familiar with the story of the crucifixion of Christ should be familiar with the uncomfortable headgear that Jesus wore up until his death. And with the massive thorns on this starfish, it's hard not to see why this name was chosen. I mean, look at the thing. That is one creature I would not want to step on. Which brings me to their appearance. As I indicated before, the top of this thing is covered in spines that are not only sharp, but venomous as well. But that's not the only thing that separates them from most starfish. While most starfish have 5 arms, the Crown-of-Thorns starfish can grow from 10 to 30. The only other starfish that is known to have more than 5 is the sunflower starfish. As far as size goes, they can get up to 40 centimeters or 16 inches in diameter. The Crown-of-Thorns is typically dull red and green or brown with deep red spines, but can be brighter colors in some areas of their range of distribution. The Crown-of-Thorns starfish is native to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Most notable locations include Hawaii, Australia, the Red Sea, India, and South Africa. They are coral reef dwellers where the adults hang out on open sand while the young hide under rocks. The Crown-of-Thorns is a nocturnal feeder, feeding at night on coral, specifically coral polyps. Now, their way of feeding may be disgusting at first, but bear with me here. Essentially what happens is that the starfish expels its stomach, releasing digestive enzymes and liquefying their prey's tissues, making it easy to absorb. After all, starfish don't have teeth and need a way to break the flesh down. And starfish aren't the only creatures to literally puke their guts out. Frogs, for example, will expel their stomach to get rid of toxic prey, while sharks will do the same to rid themselves of indigestible items. Even a fellow echinoderm, the sea cucumber, will avert their stomach to avoid predators. So while it may be gross, stomach expulsion or aversion has its uses in the animal kingdom for both vertebrate and invertebrate alike. Speaking of predators, the Crown-of-Thorns can ward off predators using said thorns as both a mechanical and a chemical defense. In addition to the initial pain of the pricking of the barbs themselves can act as an avenue for releasing toxins called saponins. Saponins are irritants and foul-tasting as well, meaning that whatever tries to eat this thorny foe is more likely just going to spit it out. If that fails, they can just grow new arms back, as starfish are known to do that. Wouldn't that be convenient? Lose an arm, just grow another. Though I would guess it would be too complex for a vertebrate with bones and muscles and all. Then again, certain lizards do regenerate lost tails. Anyway, that hasn't stopped it from being eaten, as biologists have both observed triggerfish and pufferfish feeding on it. In addition, the Triton's trumpet, a species of sea snail, is a known predator of the Crown-of-Thorns in parts of its range. Finally, a generic starfish predator is the painted shrimp. Now, moving on to reproduction, the Crown-of-Thorns reproduces sexually, meaning it needs male and female contribution. While some starfish can reproduce asexually, generating individuals from just an arm, such is not the case for the Crown-of-Thorns. While juveniles look pretty similar to adults, the larvae are completely different. Starfish larvae undergo 2 forms. The first is the bipinnaria, which, unlike the adult's pentaradial symmetry, are bilaterally symmetrical, meaning you can split them down the middle and each half would look the same with being a mirror image. In this form, you can notice the precursors to the starfish's 5 arms, with 2 developing for feeding and swimming through the open ocean via hair-like cilia. After a few days, 3 other arms develop from the bottom relative to the other 2 arms, becoming the brachyolaria stage, and from there we start to see the generic starfish shape once they undergo metamorphosis. Now you might be wondering, I said the Crown-of-Thorns has 20 to 40 arms. Where are the rest? Simple. Remember what I said about starfish having pentaradial symmetry? Well, whereas most starfish stick with the number of arms they have as larvae and juveniles, the Crown-of-Thorns will develop more arms as they mature from juveniles into adults. Now, the Crown-of-Thorns doesn't have to reproduce too quickly as they're not really under any direct threat. But their survival is dependent on coral. If the water on coral reefs gets too warm, the coral release the algae living within them, causing it to turn white and leaving them more vulnerable. No coral, no predators like the Crown-of-Thorns. Now, while I may be in the camp that says the warming Earth is not significantly caused by man, I'm not sure to be honest, I will say that we have to keep an eye on reefs as they are a harbor for biodiversity, and if we lose reefs, we're going to lose a lot of life. So best to keep our eyes open. And there you have the Crown-of-Thorns starfish. Not a creature you want to step on for sure, but certainly unique among starfish. I mean, aside from the fact that it's one of the few that has more than 5 arms, it's got an extra way of dealing with predators, which makes it pretty special. Thanks for watching. Stet out.